Right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of Not Morning People, a show where my friends Chris, Laura, and myself talk about life, technology, and share stories. Today's topic is how has the pandemic changed you? But first, we're going to start with some introductions. As you can see, we are
Hello.
beach themed today because it's really hot. But let's start with Chris.
Oh, hello. I'm Chris. I am a software developer and a dad and a writer, and I live and work in the Chapel Hill, North Carolina area in the United States.
Laura.
Hi, I'm Laura Dawson. I am a taxonomist and also a writer. I live on Staten Island, New York, and I'm a mother of two fully grown adult humans.
And I'm Nick Ruffalo. I am a software developer and a maker, a father, a husband, a lot of different fun things. And I have a young child, and I am in New Jersey. So the armpit of America, as some like to say. But
Oh,
I
it's
like
not
it.
Staten Island.
So if you're the
Staten Island
armpit,
is like
yeah,
it's the sentence always begins Staten Island man the same way it always begins Florida man.
Yeah, it
funny.
certainly does. All right, so we're gonna start off with what are you reading, Laura? What are you reading this week?
I am still on my Wolf Hall uh business, and also I'm doing a lot of research into uh the whole concept around scapegoating. So I'm reading this philosopher named Rene Girard, who basically wrote the book on scapegoating.
Awesome. And Chris?
I am reading two different things right now. I was actually just up in New York for my first trip for a little romantic weekend, and I stopped in a bookstore on the Upper East Side that I had never been to before. And I got Amazon Unbound about Jeff
Oh yeah.
Bezos. And I haven't actually started it yet, so I'm really looking forward to reading this and sort of loving and hating Jeff Bezos all at the same time. And
Hmm.
I have been feeling like I've always wanted to get into meditation, but I've always sort of had this pseudoscience love hate thing with even trying. But somebody recommended this book to me called 10% Happier by Dan Harris. And he's like a TV newscaster or something. And he was the same sort of way, very skeptical about it. And then he like tried to do it. And so he sort of talks about his whole journey into actually figuring out how to make meditation work for him. And so far, it's actually pretty good. So
I cannot recommend meditation highly enough. I mean, I've seen all different crazy forms of it and all different crazy claims from like people just being like, it helps me to like, this has saved my life and transformed me as a human being. And I am now off all of my meds and everything is perfect. And, I can use telekinesis in my mind. I've literally seen the full gamut. And the crazy part is like, I believe most of it. The crazy Magneto stuff. I'm like, all right, you gotta prove that. But it is well worth giving it a try.
I mean, especially during the pandemic, I felt like we'll talk about some of this stuff later. Like especially at the beginning of the pandemic, I was hyper connected and my screen time went up like 3 times, and now I'm trying to like disconnect and find quietude. And I feel like meditation and like turning off tech and going and sitting in a room without any tech in it could actually increase my quality of life and maybe my lifespan.
Well, I do a little hybrid. I actually put my headphones on because I meditate in bed,
Ah,
so I listen to music.
Mm.
yes,
And that
that
can
might be the
also
one
help.
exception.
Like sometimes if I just like feel like I need to flush out the negative emotions, I'll put on like last night I put on I wish I could remember the band. But basically, it was like the Braveheart soundtrack. It was deep pianos, really, really sad bagpipes, and I'm sitting there like ugly crying as I'm meditating, just getting out everything. But then I turn the music off and everything's fine. It was very cathartic to just do that for 20 minutes, and then it was like, you know what, come back to
Mhm.
reality.
So with that soundtrack, is it sort of half meditation, half fighting for freedom?
Well, as I said, it wasn't exactly Braveheart. It was Braveheart-esque, but yes, it definitely inspired
Ah,
me to don a kilt and run forward
Right.
with a sword. For
and
sure.
race across the heath to chop the limbs off
Right.
of your enemy.
Yes.
With your
Exactly. Peacefully,
blue paint on
peacefully,
your
and
face.
with mental acuity.
In the most zen-like way.
Exactly.
Right.
So for me, I'm reading Ordinary Hazards, a memoir, and I realize my video is probably reversed.
I see it.
It's by Nikki Grimes, and my wife is actually reading it. She's like, I'm reading this great book, but it's different. It's written in prose. I'm like, okay. She's like, well, you have to get into the rhythm of it first, and then you really like it. I'm like, I'm fine with that. Like, I did experimental literature in college. Like, reading in prose is not a concern to me. Bring it on. And it's just a beautifully written book. It's the beginning is deeply sad, because it's just it follows a girl's life as she goes through a lot of things. Her mother is schizophrenic and an alcoholic. So the mother just leaves for a few days, and then Child Protective Services comes and takes them away and separates the two daughters. It's just it's heart-wrenching, but she's so good, and it's also fast-paced. So what I hate is when people wallow in the sadness, because I can't wait too long. I'm a softie on that stuff. But to go through it, I'm like, okay, I can feel it, and this is terrible, but it moves forward, and it finds light in, in every bad situation. There is something good and fun. So it's just a wonderful ride. So it's a great read. And anyone else who wants to, add to chat, to comments, wherever else what you're reading, we would absolutely love to hear that.
I like books that are about people working their way through sadness. And when I say like, I'm not sure I mean but it's very interesting. Like there's a book called Without by Donald Hall, where he was married to the poet Jane Kenyon, who died too young of cancer, and this whole book was him kind of like working his way through his emotions about like what is life like without this person that was my kind of soulmate or whatever. And so it kind of runs the gamut of emotions of anger and depression and everything. And I've actually given it to a few people who had just recently lost someone, and it was sort of a risky gift in a way because like it's about facing your grief head on. But in both cases, people were like, "Oh my God, this was rough, but gosh, it sure did help me on my own little journey."
Oh, good.
Mhm.
Yeah, Donald Hall is brilliant.
All right. So next is, what are you looking forward to this week? So I'm gonna start. So, in school, in college, some of the best advice that I ever got was that all of success is being in the right place at the right time. But you don't know what the right place is or what the right time is. But the only time we have is now, and the right place is very rarely your couch. And what that means is go out there, be places where good things can happen, and the right time will just magically happen. And that's how it works. And I say that because on Sunday, I was at my town's Pride celebration.
Mm.
And it was just, a small thing. I live in a medium-sized town, and, just chatting with a lot of people. And this woman, Liz, who runs our arts program, she said, "Hey, are you coming to this art expo next week?" I was like, "I have no idea what that is." She's like, "Oh, well, it's this county-wide thing where each town has a set location, and it's, being advertised throughout the county, and we get to show off all our local artists, and you get to have a booth, and, you get to sell if you'd like." And I was like, "Oh, that sounds interesting." She's like, "We have 2 extra tables. Would you like one?" And I was like, "Oh, okay. I think I can do that." So I said yes. So I am now, have an art table, and I'm an artist, if you want to even call it that. So I am looking forward to, I guess this is my first art show.
Are you gonna have
That's so
mad eye
great.
moody eyes and like sparkly potion bottles and all of that stuff there?
So I don't have any Moody Eyes created, but I will certainly be showing off some things like that. But I do have an auto stirring potion bottle, which is huge, that I will be putting there, and I've got a lot of woodworking stuff. I have I have a giant wizard staff I made for myself last summer. So I'm gonna bring some art pieces that I don't necessarily sell, as
Yeah.
well as a lot of the items that I do sell, and the goal will be to um, drum up custom jobs, because that's what I prefer. Like, I prefer someone coming to me and saying, here is what I want, here's my favorite color, here are the things, and then me making something custom, as opposed to me just saying, I found this really cool thing and I put LEDs in it, which is fun and neat, but usually not the most enjoyable for me.
Mm.
So that's what I'm looking forward to. Chris, what about you?
I mean, I'm looking forward to something that isn't actually going to happen this week, but I can plan it happening that this week, and that is I've started to get flyers from all of my favorite theater companies who are actually
Mm.
announcing their like 21, 22 seasons and stuff. And this one's for the American Shakespeare Center, which is in Stanton, Virginia. It's actually one of the best indoor Shakespeare theaters that I've ever been to, and it's just in this little town in Virginia. Um, so just the idea that I get to plan, in this summer sometime or in October to go see some live Shakespeare to me is like, for whatever reason, mentally, I'm marking like the end of the pandemic, back being able to sit in a theater with a crowd
Yep.
and see a
Yep.
play. Like I said, I was just in New York. I didn't see any plays because they're not open yet, but the idea that in September, October, I can go up there and see Hadestown again or something like that is just like, whew. I am, it's like it's the light at the end. It's the end of the tunnel. It's not the light at the end. It's the end. It's not really the end, but it seems symbolically that way to me.
Yep. Yep.
All right, and Laura?
Well, in a similar vein, I scored a ticket to the New York Philharmonic, which is giving a
Ooh.
concert in Bryant Park um, on Saturday. So, yeah, uh, it will be the first time I've been back to the Philharmonic in forever. And again, it's very it's very similar to Chris what you were saying. I feel like it's marking the end of this incredibly difficult time, when especially in the New York area, our culture and cultural kind of benchmarks just went away.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I thought of one other thing that I'm looking forward to, and that is I've got two kids, one that's 17 and the other one's 14 and a half, and the younger one, uh, like last Friday, got the second dose of Moderna.
Ooh.
So,
Mm.
and I've got sort of dad summer coming up in about a week, and so when my little summer vacation starts, both of them will be fully vaccinated and sort of just in that the waiting period for the younger one. So I'm looking forward to like taking them to a movie or going to,
Right.
they've been very anxious and worried about, catching the disease and spreading it and all these kinds of
Mhm.
things. So I'm not going to like push it, but like I think they would probably be comfortable like going to one of our favorite restaurants and sitting in some of the outdoor seating. And like
Yep.
that's another thing, like being able to do normal things with the kids and have them hang out with each other without having to be like on the back deck wearing masks and stuff. Like I can't even imagine
Yeah.
what this part of these kids' lives. They're old enough that they'll remember it forever. Um,
Yep.
so like trying to get them back to some semblance of normalcy with their friends and like they have enough to worry about as teens to have to worry about
Mhm.
what am I breathing on? What am I breathing in? What am I touching? So so
Yep.
they're almost through this tunnel and fully protected too. So I'm looking forward to that being over for them.
That's great. And yeah, everyone else, please tell us what you're looking forward to this week. The goal is to kind of share in each other's happiness and to always have something we're looking forward to. But Chris, that was a great lead-in. So now we're gonna talk about how the now we're gonna talk about how the pandemic has changed you. So I guess let's start with how has the work situation changed, and what of that change do you think you're gonna carry forward? Laura, do you want to start us off?
Sure. So yeah, I mean, my company went fully remote. I had gone, I used to say I'd gone inside about a week before the company just fully decided to go online only, um, because I have asthma and I had concerns about, being around people. Um, but I think the way we're going to handle it is we're going to go back probably shortly after Labor Day. And I'm planning on being in the office 3 days a week and then working from home the other two. Um, and that will be different. I haven't done much of a hybrid model over the course of my career. I've always been like fully remote or fully on site.
Now, your commute is largely, actually, it's fully mass transit. So, do you enjoy that
Uh,
time or no?
I used to hate it. But now having been without it, there is something to that kind of liminal, neither here nor there, process at the end of every day.
Hmm.
Um, and that it's a state of decompression, and a really hard transition between work and home. Whereas, where I'm working at home, the transition is, I have to go out and take a walk. That's usually how I handle it. Or if the weather's bad, I'm just moving from one chair to another, and that's that's really not as, I don't know. I like a firm boundary.
I never really thought about how, like, yeah, it's much more abrupt now. Like, you would kind of like get on your jacket and put on your
Yep.
babushka or whatever you put on, and get out the door. And then you'd have this, like, yeah, like you'd get on the ferry, and then you'd be able to
Yep.
read, and you'd be walking over, and you'd get on the elevator, and you'd stop and get your coffee, and so you had this kind of
Yep.
like
Yep.
time to, like, I don't know, prepare yourself. Um, and
Right.
it's
Exactly.
now it's like sitting down and like turning on the monitor, and like there you are. You're at work. Wherever you are, you're at work.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, no, I mean, most days I'm rolling out of bed and, sitting at the desk in my robe and
Right.
starting the day that way. It's There is no transition at all. It's like I'm asleep and now I'm at work.
Yeah, yeah, and your work is always with you. It's not like over there in the building.
Right.
Well, yeah, which
For
is sort of more stressful, I think.
the last time
It
I
is. I
had a,
mean, I love
oh,
Yeah,
No, I was just going to say I love my job, but
yeah.
you do need that boundary.
yeah, the last time I commuted, I actually had a really nice commute into Jersey City, which is right across from New York City. It might as well be the same commute.
Yep,
But it was a
exactly.
little less than an hour, and it was two legs. So I had a light rail ride, which was 10 minutes, and then I had a 40-minute ish, 30-minute train, depending on if I got an express or not. But this was also before you had this was before smartphones.
Mm.
So
Mm,
when you were on the commute, there was no internet. You just that was just there was no option.
You were
So you
offline.
read, and
yeah.
it was for me also as someone who at home, like, I love computer games, I love, like, I'm always connected. The commute was my forced time to have no internet and just read, and I actually read a whole lot more than I used to. I did a
Hmm.
lot more writing, just because I had no other option, and it was a really great kind of forced time to do that. um,
Mm.
so that I carried with me when I switched to being remote pretty much everywhere else, was that, find some forced reason to transition, because I noticed a lot of my coworkers don't have that.
Hmm.
Yep.
Was it like a train commute? How were you riding?
Yes,
You were
it
not.
was trained. So I would drive about a mile to the train station, or I'd walk, and then it was train, and then light rail.
Were you using Moleskine notebooks and a fancy pen?
No. Cheapy, college ruled notebooks
Yeah,
or a
I can't. I
laptop,
haven't.
but
I haven't had a commute in a long time either. But my one time I was in Indiana way back during the .com bust, and I was lucky enough, quote unquote, to get a gig when everyone else I knew was like, "Oh my God, we're out of work. We can't make house payments." And I found a gig down in Indianapolis, but the downside was that I had a 75-mile commute. So I had to get in a
Yeah.
car and like drive, 80, 90 minutes, depending on traffic, from West Lafayette, where Purdue is, down to Indianapolis, and counted myself lucky. But one thing that I did to like kind of pass the time was I got a library card at both libraries on each end. And I would do, and
Cool.
again, this was, again, this was like 2001, pre smartphone and all that stuff. So I would get books on tape that were literally on tapes. Um,
Yes.
and ended up like I was like, I'm gonna read all the longest books.
to
So I let
continue
I did.
listening, please remove the tape and flip to the other side.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
And the big books would come in. Like I read like the Lord of the Rings trilogy and
Mm.
Count of Monte Cristo, and those were like 57 tape sized books.
Yes.
So they came in like you'd have like a box, and it would be like almost your co-passenger would be a stack of tapes.
Yep.
Anyway,
So,
but
Chris, how has the work situation changed for you?
yeah, so I mean, that's the one weird thing was because I've been a self-employed software developer for so long, like my day-to-day experience, like thankfully, luckily, uh, didn't change. Like I never needed to put myself in harm's way. I get up and my home office is right here in the dining room. Um, so, I mean, the things that changed were more sort of business related. Like I had clients who were very affected by the pandemic who just went away. Like I had one client who we were building this really cool online app, and he was a composer that wrote and licensed music to high school and college marching bands um,
Mm.
for all of their sportsing. And literally in a week, all of his clients went away. They all asked for refunds. Um,
Oh my
he
God.
he lost so much money in a month that like he couldn't pay my bill. He couldn't even pay his like house payment. Um, so I was like, I just canceled the invoice and was like, you need this money way more than I do. Good luck. See you later. And there was a few clients like that. There's an app for field work for a disaster recovery company, and they were like, we're not doing that
Mm.
now. We're all at home. Um, but having said that, like the pandemic also presented some opportunities. Like I got a gig with the U.S. government for this sort of secret nuclear energy lab in the state of Washington, and they wanted local people, but because of the pandemic, they couldn't find anybody local, and
Wow.
no one was going to the office anyway. So they threw they cast lines much wider, and I ended up with this really good virtual gig. So I mean, so they almost single-handedly replaced the other clients that I lost. So that was actually pretty fortuitous and super lucky, and I'm thankful that that happened.
Mm.
Um, but I mean, like a couple things that like in the South, I'm not from the South, but I've been here for 16 years. There's a lot of sort of like handshaky, let's get lunch, like FaceTime meetings that like
Yeah.
clients. I'm not saying I don't enjoy them because I do, and I have clients that are really fun or whatever. But there was a lot of like meetings, like why don't you come over to Charlotte for the week and work on site? Like it's nothing I couldn't do from here, but they just would like to see me and like
Mm.
to have me sitting in the office and like show me what's going on new in the warehouse. And um, obviously during the pandemic and post-pandemic, like it's very clear to everyone, or a lot more clear to everyone, just how much meetings don't need to be in person. that like
Yes.
you don't need to pay me for travel time. You don't need to pay my room and board. um, I mean, it's again, it's still nice to see people in person or whatever, but I think it's shown everyone, and thank goodness we had the technology to make and the internet to do it, or at least a lot of us did. Yeah, so like the idea I think going forward of like needing to do business travel just because people want to see me is probably going to wane a little bit. And then the other thing that I felt sort of early on, and maybe this is partly just being self-employed, was when some of those clients started to go away. um, I really started thinking about like, oh, maybe I need to like diversify my skills. Like maybe I need to cast my own lines a little bit further to like. So I actually started to take some little online classes to learn more about iOS app development, so like native app development. And I'm already like a certified PMP project manager, but like Scrum and Agile is like, the hot new thing. So I
Yep.
actually have done some online courses to learn some Scrum project management stuff because that's kind of like universally applicable, not just to software. Like if you know the methodology,
Yep.
you can manage building a bridge
Exactly.
or building a factory, and in the same way you can manage building software. So it's like learning new things because I had a little extra time to do it, and then
Yep.
yeah, the meeting stuff. Those are the main things for me.
Now,
What about you, Nick? What?
Yes.
huh? I
I
mean,
said, what about you?
work didn't change too much for me. I've been remote for several years. Um, and obviously the team I work with was now remote. But we're just, we would always have a meeting room open because I would be in, or there would be someone else who was remote. So we kind of dodged a bullet. And my company did very, very, very well this year and last year. So, we got really lucky in that aspect. But it did change the viewpoint of working from home. So the company I work for was very much, work from home was something that was a rarity. It should only happen if you really, really need to. And I think they've realized now, at least, that it's not a bad word, and it's not a bad thing. And it's okay. Maybe some people can work from home a few days a week or that, but we're starting to transition back to the office. And for those who were, they're certainly getting there. But it's really interesting to see, because they'll be like, well, now that we're gonna be hybrid, don't expect us to be forking over money for two setups, one for home, one for office. You either bring your setup to the work, and then you have your home office, which you furnish, or things like that. So it's really interesting. So because like, okay, this is minor money here, but okay.
I read a statistic, I think on Twitter this morning, and I think I'm remembering these numbers right, where they did a big poll, and it said 39% of people polled said they would consider looking for, like, strongly consider looking for a new job if their employer required them to switch back from remote to fully in the office. 39%, and then like that went up to 49% for like Gen Z millennial people
Mm.
in the survey. So basically they're like, listen, I like working from home. And
Yeah.
if you like want to just make us come back for some FaceTimey reason that is not really required to get the work done, like I'm gonna go look for something that lets me stay here. I just thought that was
Yep.
pretty interesting.
Well,
Which doesn't bode well for business office space, commercial real
Right.
estate.
I think a lot of it has to do also with childcare.
Yes.
Because America didn't have a good childcare infrastructure to begin with. It was extremely costly. It was extremely difficult, but we jumped through the hoops because we had to. But if you think about it, my local school, it starts at 8 o'clock, it ends at 3 o'clock. I can't go into the city and support that, because if I drop you off at 8, I'm in at 9:30. And to get
Right.
back at 3, I have to leave at 1:30. So it just doesn't work. And there are aftercare options, but not every school has been open with that. So I think that, my belief is that, yes, that survey is reasonable, but I think that survey is also a slice in time, that right now we don't have that childcare infrastructure. We also don't have, the kids aren't vaccinated. So even though grandparents may or may, likely are, if they are an option, the kids are not. So it's I think that plays a lot into it as well.
I'm just glad
Yes.
that Congress is going to pass universal child care soon, right? Am I right? They're going to do that soon, aren't they?
Don't hold your breath.
Ugh.
Probably not.
Yeah.
But
So
what
how has
about socializing, though? Oh, there you go.
Nice lead.
Yes. Yeah.
So how has your social life, or how have you navigated attempting to remain social over this past year and a half? Chris, you already have some ideas, so and Laura looks deep in thought. So let's start with you, Chris.
Well, one thing that I wanted to, this isn't exactly an answer to the question, but while I was traveling, this last weekend was my first trip to an airport and my first flight on a plane since, April 2020. And so, that was a little bit weird. But one thing I noticed as I was like going through the airport and going through the plane and everything is that like I have this like very heightened sense of like noticing the difference between like I don't know how to put it, like sort of more self comfort focused or just generally focused sort of jerky people versus
Mm.
community focused, like people like thinking about the greater good more and in addition to themselves. Like I was at the Delta Sky Club at LaGuardia and like it was pretty empty. I mean, normally they have like a big buffet with food and a big buffet with free drinks and whatever, and it was pretty empty. And in spite of that, I was still sitting there with my mask on because that was the rule. But there was like a guy who, like, he's like wearing a sport jacket and he's like not wearing a mask, even though you're supposed to. And he's kind of strutting around like a big, rooster.
Yeah.
And like he like shouts over to the bar and he's like, "Where's the dinner?" And the poor lady's like, "Excuse me, sir?" And he's like, "Normally you have a big spread with the free dinner here. Where's the free dinner?" And she's
Oh
like, "I'm
my
sorry, sir,
God.
we don't have a buffet during the pandemic, sir. We have some wrapped, sandwiches and we have a few
Right.
things." He's like, "So there's no and all this stuff and like there was that, and then there was a woman on the plane who was like supposed to be wearing her mask, but like basically every time the flight attendant would pass, she would like take it back off and like keep talking to her friend and blowing her nose and uh,
Oh my
you know,
God.
I
Yeah.
so it's one of these things where like I'm not trying to say I'm better than any of these people or anything, but just like I, it just always makes me wonder, like when we learned in school, like about people coming together to like save rubber and save tin for the war effort and stuff like that. That there was like, sure, there was like protests and people were against it, blah blah blah. But it just seems like we can't come together for anything now. And
Right.
like,
Right.
I guess to tie it back to the actual question, like now more than ever, I feel like I want to come together. Like I want to be part of the solution and I want to think about other people and my effect on them in all the ways, whether it's the pandemic, whether it's trash, whether it's climate change, how I act on a plane, all of it. So that's one thing. I've got more, but somebody else want to go? I mean, another one related to travel that I I I noticed, I guess, since I was doing this trip and it's fresh in my mind is like there are some things about the pandemic habits that I actually kind of like. Like I sort of see places now where I kind of want to maybe wear a mask, even after the cases are like almost gone or gone, like in a crowded subway or
Yep.
on a crowded
Yep.
plane or just in crowds in general, or when I was in New York, and going into Van Leeuwen's to get some ice cream in the village, or going into a restaurant or whatever, like the whole idea of like social distancing while you're waiting in line, just that I'm
Mhm.
like I like that we're sort of forced even in big cities to like give each other more space.
Yep.
And not just be like, right on top of each other. All that goes out the window when I finally get to see Hadestown, obviously, because they're probably not gonna remove seats from the theater.
No.
Um, but yeah, like the idea of wearing a mask, or even just the idea of like getting sick less often. I'm sure getting sick less often now that I'm not, in the room
For
with people
sure.
coughing and yeah. So
Yeah, I haven't had a cold. And usually I get like bronchitis or a sinus infection every year. pretty much like clockwork, and that has not happened. So
Yeah,
I'm
it's
very,
nice, right?
very into uh yeah, exactly. Also in the wintertime, again with asthma, super cold air
Mhm.
is hard for me to breathe. But having a mask on in the wintertime um is really helpful because it warms up the air that I'm breathing.
You're making a little microclimate for yourself.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely will adopt a mask in the winter just because of the. It just, I
Yeah.
mean, it's a scarf basically.
Yeah, essentially.
So maybe they'll start coming out with little like merino wool ones, so that it'll be a mask and it'll be like a little warm little muzzle.
Well,
I do have one of those, those big hats that with the faux fur liner, and it
Mm.
came with a face mask, and this was well before the pandemic. Yeah, but the mask sort of straps around and attaches at the ear flaps. There are little buttons there.
Hmm.
that's nice. Well, I
Yeah.
realized through the at least last year and a half how much of my socialization was just like casually saying hi. You know, like pick up and drop off at school, even just in
Yep.
person meetings. So, you know, I'm on a lot of councils and a lot of groups within my town, and if the meeting is, let's say, 7:30 to 8:30, people are there at 7:15 and they're casually talking to each other, and then at 8:30 when it's over, which things just always seem to be a little more efficient in person. When
Yeah.
you remove the delay and you have the social cues, people aren't talking over each other. It just tends to work a little bit easier. And then it would end at 8:30, and then people would chat again for another 15 minutes. So that's a half hour of socialization. Whereas now the Zoom starts at 8:30, and you get your business done. And sure, people might hang around afterwards, but when you have 12 people hanging around, you've 12 conversations, and it never works. So
Right.
I lost a lot of that socialization. Um, and that was a big part of it. So for me, um, it was very weird in that sort of socialization was just all gone.
It definitely makes me want to get more of that in-person socialization. Like I don't want like like the three of us have hung out and like played a game online and all that kind of stuff, and that was fun for the time. But golly gosh, when I'm done with work, I just want to like turn off all the computers and not have tech in my bedroom and like try not to do YouTube, like go on walks, go to
Yep.
outdoor places. But then like I need to do something where I'm around people again. Like I used to run a classic literature book club locally for years, and it was amazing. And we would go to different people's houses and go to coffee shops and meet over scones and talk about classic books. And I'm actually seriously considering like restarting that because I feel like I would like it. And probably there's a lot of people like me who are itching to be around other people
Oh yeah.
for the conversation around the edges stuff that you're talking about, Nick, that you just don't get when people are like, the meeting starts now, boop. Okay, the meeting's over now, it's
Yeah.
9 o'clock, boop, and they're gone, because
Exactly.
Zoom isn't designed for like convos and post convos necessarily.
Well, I've always said there's
Yeah.
two types of people who play board games. There's people who want to win, and then there's geeks who want a reason to talk to each other but can't do it unless there's a board game in front of them.
Right.
But it's true.
Which one
It's
of
a
those are you, Nick?
Which one of those? I'm certainly the latter. I could care less if I win. I will admit I actually if I'm doing well in a board game, I will often throw so that people will kind of they'll catch up. Like I could care less. I want everyone to have fun and I want to chat.
Mm.
And a lot of it allows for conversation to happen over the game if there's not other conversation to be had.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's
Oh.
other things too. There's so many things for me. Like I think like while I was forced to stay in, I learned that I want to do more cooking at home. Like I was doing lots of dining out and getting expensive food and going to coffee shops and getting expensive coffees. And like I realized, not only was I forced to make my own stuff and make my own coffee, but I actually enjoy trying to make a good cup of coffee, and I enjoy puttering around the kitchen. And then there was a few things that popped up during the pandemic that I think were sort of on the wane, like locally, somebody turned a parking lot into a drive-in theater, and like
Hmm.
that theater has been really successful, and like hopefully it persists post pandemic. Like next week I'm actually going to go see In the Heights, that the movie,
Ah,
at
right.
this drive-in, and park in a big lot and turn the
Cool.
radio to the right station. And I haven't done that probably since I don't know, Star Wars in 1977. It's been a long time. uh so
Right.
that is kind of cool. Like, I'm glad that stuff like that's coming out. And even when I was in New York too, I realized, I like traveling, and I always, my go-to is like big cities and stuff, but I kind of would like to maybe add more like naturey, outdoor, spread out stuff. Like, I want to go see the
Hmm.
Badlands. Never been to the Badlands.
Oh, wow.
Or yeah, like nature, the magnificence of nature versus like the magnificence of human culture. Like, I need to add more of that for the fresh air and the
Yep.
built-in social distancing.
Yeah, I've
Yeah,
become really addicted to this amazing park that is like a block away from my apartment.
yeah.
Where it's a way station for migrating birds. Um,
Ooh,
so there's egrets, there's herons, all kinds of herons. There's hawks and cormorants, and I mean, just so many different kinds of cool ducks, fancy ones. Um, and just going there and just like, okay, what birds am I going to see today? That's very cool.
Well, Chris, certainly travel and see nature before it's not nature anymore. Like,
Yeah.
so I went to the Grand Canyon when I was a teenager, and it was wonderful because there was nothing built up. I mean, obviously there were hotels and things, but like when you went to the Grand Canyon, it was just, maybe the occasional like sign saying don't walk past here, things like that. But it was just nature. And you could kind of go wherever. And, the glass bridge, for example, as cool as an
Mm,
experience that might be, it's not nature. Like, I I think that alone would sully it for me. Like, that would just make it feel like, I don't know, it just feels like it doesn't belong. Um
yeah.
and a lot of that is changing. I mean, and there's still a lot of pristine nature and a lot of pristine parks.
mm.
But as we as a society, are putting up more boundaries and more ropes and things like that. I understand it's for protection, but it also it
Right.
changes that beauty and feel, at least for me.
And the irony of the pandemic too is I think a lot of those sites were completely overrun with people. So
Hmm.
like the desire to get out and be away from people, and not be indoors and be safer, but still do something family oriented, has made it,
Right.
at the same time as like people who worked in those parks needed to stay home or got sick, so they were short staffed. So like it was kind of this triple whammy of
Oh, yeah.
too many people and not enough. So we probably have wrecked up a lot of these natural wonder places a little bit, that we need to
Although
like give them a
it
little
wouldn't
TLC
surprise
now.
me if they had like some volunteer program where you could get like a discounted ticket if you're willing to go in and pick up garbage. And as
Huh.
Yeah.
unfun as that might sound, like to grab the kids and say, all right, for one day, for 6 hours, we're gonna do the boring job of picking up garbage in a park, but we're gonna be contributing to this park, and then we get to chill in the
Yep.
park. Like, you get the park
Mhm.
ranger for a day badge. I think experiences like that um are really interesting. I mean, my son, my Rotary Club has adopted one of our local parks, and we do cleanups. So it's usually 4 or 5 times a year. But my son comes, and we go and we pick up garbage and things like that, and we always bring all the trash bags together and look how much it is. And he's like, I cleaned this park. This is my clean park. And whenever we go there, he's like, he'll pick up garbage if he sees it and throw it away, because that's our relationship to the park.
So speaking of Dexter, like how has his experience been through this whole pandemic? Like, what do you think? How has his schooling been, and like, is he looking forward to being done with the pandemic. He's not old enough to get vaccinated yet, I don't think.
He is not. He is turning 10 actually in a week.
Uh-uh.
But no, not old enough for the vaccine yet, and he certainly wants to. But it's been a mixed bag for him. He is a very huggy person. And that has been hard for him. He is just, he loves that aspect of social interaction. But he is a huge fan of video games. And one thing the pandemic did loosen was our stance on both social media, or at least interaction. We don't let him on social media, but Facebook Messenger became the big thing for kids. So with Facebook Messenger Kids, you can set who they can and can't talk to. So we set that he can talk to all his friends. There's also been some online games that normally we would not have let him play, but when the pandemic started, it was like, all right, well, your friends are playing this. This is how they're connecting. So, we talked to him about it, about what the rules and regulations and everything should be. And it gave him access to things he normally would not have. So he managed to stay well connected with his friends. He also switched schools. My wife got a new job, so in a better district. So he went with her, which was great in a sense, because that school had a lot of consistency. So they pretty much had the same plan throughout the entire year, which was the cohorts were morning cohort and afternoon cohort. So he was in school 5 days a week, and he had consistency there. So I'm sure he's, when he looks back on this, there's things that he, particularly didn't like about it. But I think my wife and I focused very heavily on making sure he was comfortable and that, his needs were met. And he certainly misses his friends and being able to roll around on the grass with them. But he definitely took it a lot better than a lot of people, and remained relatively happy throughout the whole process.
Yeah.
And what about your kids?
Yeah,
because your kids are at that go out and sneak out of the house stage, or at least not necessarily that, but they're teenagers.
Sneak out to go to parties or whatever. I mean, the older one had a car. I would say that for both of them, it was really about hanging out with their friends. Like they're both in the AP gifted talented program. So the switch to online, both of their parents are very tech savvy. So we have all the tools and all the laptops and all that stuff. So academically they were fine, and probably doing classes online was not as fun, but they still all got straight A's, and that academic part was fine. But the socializing was really hard. Just to not be able to go hang out with your girlfriend, or not be able to go hang out with your friend. And eventually there was some little pods that were formed of this is a safe kid and this is an unsafe kid, and just felt a little weird. But these are the choices you have to make. We know that they're not gonna put their kids with other people that we don't know. We're gonna stay in. But yeah, and like you said, the screen time thing sort of went out the window, or there was a difference between is it screen time socializing, or is it screen time mindless consumption? Because the social, Charlie, the younger one, had a Dungeons and Dragons group of friends that meet every weekend, and they could go for hours on Zoom meetings and stuff. I was like, however, if you're talking to other humans, it doesn't matter how long. See you at dinner. But yeah, I mean, the one hard thing was that they were really, really freaked out about the pandemic at the very beginning. And I'm divorced, so we have a kid exchange and that kind of stuff. And for the first couple of months, they were so scared, even though the governor of North Carolina said there's a lockdown except for if you're going to see your other parent. There was a couple exceptions, and that was one of them. But they literally refused to leave their mom's house because they were just so completely petrified of getting sick, or just what's at dad's house. I don't know I don't know. I'm not exactly sure it was some rational thing. But so I was sort of familyless for about 9
Mhm.
weeks at the beginning of the
Yep.
pandemic, and that was hard. I mean, it was
Oh my
lonely. I
God,
wasn't
yeah.
around anybody, not even my own kids. So
Yeah,
anyway,
mine are grown and, out of the house and, working and whatnot, but even so, it was a year before I saw Sarah, my oldest. And I mean, she lives very close by. She lives in Harrison, New Jersey, which is just outside of Newark.
yeah,
And I just it was so hard. And then when I got immunized, the very first thing that happened was that she and her boyfriend came over for dinner. And we hugged, and I hadn't hugged anybody in a year, which, yeah, it was insane. And I mean, I live by myself, so in a way, it was a lot easier because I didn't have to worry about anybody else's, fears or feelings or anything like that. But on the other hand, even for someone who likes being on their own, um, a year solid of that gets really old.
Yeah, and you're
yeah,
close
and
with your
just
kids too,
having
Laura. They're grown, but
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly.
now,
yeah.
so how did this change your relationship with your kids? So obviously, Laura, I mean, I know you stay in pretty good contact, but like, was this something that you feel pushed you guys closer, or like how did it change that the way that you communicate, or just anything around that?
It's kind of hard to tell because as your kids grow, the relationships evolve, right?
Hmm.
And so much of it has to do with where they are in their lives. Um, so you know, with Sarah particularly, the she she was working. She works full time at a market research firm, and we were doing a lot of comparing notes about, working from home and what does that mean, and office setups, home office setups, and things like that. So, and it really depends on where your kid is in their life, and how you're going to meet them there.
And Chris, what about
Yeah.
you? I know you said the first 9 weeks were really tough, but after that, like did it change, or how? I guess, yeah. How and if did it change that relationship?
I mean, the first 9 weeks were really hard for the other reason, which was that they're both teenagers, and in person, like they're reasonably talkative, like at least with their dad. Like if I will ask them
Mm.
stuff, they'll respond or whatever. But they're not, or at least not with me. They were not big into texting, or for the first 9 weeks I was trying to do like Zoom. I was like, well, can we at least do Zoom call so I can see you and talk to you? And we tried that a little bit, and like they just weren't into it. I don't know if it was the format or the fact that it was their dad or whatever, but it was just like, oh, hi, dad. And then it was like me kind of interviewing them for 5 minutes, like, how are you? And what have you been up to? And then it was all kind of one word answers, and then wanting to be done really fast. Um, and
Yeah.
once it was in person again, then it was better. But like, again, they were like pretty freaked out about, like, even they just wanted to be like in my ex's house or in my house, and like that's opened up a
Right.
little bit where they've met with friends with masks on the back porch and stuff as the pandemic went along and so forth. But
Mm.
it would be like, hey, do you want to just ride along while I go pick up food at the restaurant? No. Do you want to just like go for a walk and we won't see anybody? Like it's might just a suburban neighborhood. Like, I don't know, I don't feel comfortable. Um,
Hmm.
so I worry a little bit that like that generalized anxiety will kind of carry post pandemic even after they're vaccinated. Like they're just going to be this post traumatic stress like people had during the
Oh,
depression. Like they're not sure it's over. Like
exactly.
you're waiting for the next wave. There's going to be a next
Right,
wave,
right.
that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Um, so
I
I worry a
totally
little
agree.
about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think and again, it depends on where your kids are in, in their lives. Um, but even toddlers, like, how is it going to affect them years and years from now?
Yeah.
What are kids going to carry with them into adulthood as a result of this bizarre time that is completely unlike any other time that we've experienced in any kind of, modern memory.
Right. And not toddling around with other kids at all in many cases for like a whole
Yeah,
year and several months.
e- exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know
Yeah.
so
I
many
wonder.
parents of small children who are just really worried about their kids' development.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
it's certainly something we're gonna have to address. I mean, the only positive is because this is a systemic and global thing. We're gonna get
Hmm.
an extremely rare situation in science where we're gonna have different countries
Yes,
that are gonna take different approaches, and we'll actually be able to
yes,
see, those who
yep,
decided this program, and that does mean that sadly, quite a lot of children are not going to get the right solution. Um,
yep.
but we're gonna have a unique experience where we're gonna actually, hopefully learn, and hopefully we take mental health a little more seriously, because people are gonna have
Yeah.
problems, but if we can provide the support network in the future, and we can provide the services, then I think we can overcome a lot of it.
Yeah. One sort of late stage pandemic, light at the end of the tunnel thing that I could say for sure is that now that I'm vaccinated, and especially after this trip to New York, where I'm like, I went there and I came back and I'm alive and I didn't catch any
Yeah.
diseases and whatever, is like, I just want to be around tech a lot less. I just want to, my day job was already tech and I was already around it a
Yep.
lot, but I want to ditch all of those Zoom, board game nights and watching YouTube and being glued to the news. And I've like banned phones and any tech. I don't even have a digital clock in my bedroom. Like I don't. I want to have a tech-free zone in my house.
Yes.
And at
Yes.
every opportunity to like go out to meet somebody that I haven't seen in a while, set up a lunch, set up a dinner, reconnect with actual people across a table or at a bar. Um, I'm gonna take
Yeah.
it because I really need that in-person interaction more now than ever.
I
Yep.
agree. All right, so being
Yep.
mindful of the time, we'll transition to the end. And Chris, actually, you edited our notes, and put in something really good here. So I actually want to just have a general theme, and we're still welcome to do ours. But so Chris put in here to remember to tip your delivery drivers. And
Yeah.
I want to extend to that also. If you have the ability to shop a little bit local, and
Hmm.
I mean, there's always that difference. I have a local Dunkin' Donuts that employs local people, but
Right.
right down the block I have a local coffee shop that is owned by someone who lives on my block. So I might pay an extra 35 cents 45 cents for a cup of coffee, but it is supporting 100% local, or at least coffee's not local, but
Yeah.
so yeah, for giving back is, or at least my theme, and it seems like Chris's, and I'll let Chris expand if he wants, is really just our local businesses are starting to recover, and the restaurants, and if you have the means and the capability and the ability to do so, try support local. Chris and Laura,
Yep.
or Chris, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, when I was in New York for the weekend, right? Like I was checking out on a lot of Square apps on iPads and whatever. And whenever that tip screen would
Yes.
come up, I literally would, whatever it showed, I would tap the one furthest to the right. So it's like, is it 25%? Yeah, okay. Is it 30%? Like whatever you put up there,
Right.
like
Yep.
thank you. Like thank you for
Right.
being this connection to the food that I want to eat and the drinks I want to drink. And yeah, it just
Yep.
made me feel very thankful to the people who are, literally the connection to the things that I need to get by every day.
Totally agree.
Mm.
Totally. I also like to support. There's an organization in New York called God's Love We Deliver, um, which it sort of came up during the AIDS crisis in the 80s and 90s, but its remit has expanded, and they deliver meals to folks who can't otherwise get them, folks who are ill and can't go out, can't shop, etc. Uh,
Yeah,
so that's who I am giving to this week.
lovely.
All right. Well, thank you all for coming. Thank you, Chris and Laura, for joining me today. This episode, the video will be up on YouTube later today on my YouTube channel, and it will be available on the podcast networks within a few days. So our next episode will be scheduled for 2 weeks from Monday. So a little less than 2 weeks away. If that changes, I will let people know.
Great.
Thanks for coming, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you
Have a
so
lovely
much
week.
for
Have a lovely
listening.
week and weekend.